The cuffs bit into Sergeant Malik Thompson's wrists, cold and unyielding, as the crowd's murmurs swelled like a storm about to break. He'd faced gunfire in Kandahar, but nothing burned like the humiliation of being shackled on Main Street, USA, in his own damn uniform. Malik stood tall, his army greens pressed crisp, the silver star and purple heart pinned to his chest glinting under the noon sun. He'd just stepped out of the barber shop, fresh fade, ready to surprise his mom for her birthday. Now, two cops, one with a sneer that screamed trouble, the other looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, had him pinned against a patrol car. The older cop, Officer Dan Carver, spat accusations like venom. "You fit the description," he growled, yanking Malik's arm. "Black male, 30s, suspicious behavior." Suspicious? Malik had been walking, just walking. The younger cop, Officer Ryan Holt, shifted uneasily, his hand hovering near his radio. "Dan, maybe we should," he started, but Carver cut him off with a glare. "You want to explain to the captain why we let a suspect walk?" Malik's jaw tightened. Suspect. The word landed like a punch. He'd served 2 tours, saved lives, lost friends, yet here he was, reduced to a suspect in his hometown. The crowd grew thicker, phones out, recording. A woman yelled, "He's a soldier, you idiots." A teenage boy, no older than 16, shouted, "This is bullshit." Malik locked eyes with the kid, willing him to stay calm. He knew how fast this could spiral. He'd seen it before on the news, in stories from his cousin Jamal, who never made it home from a traffic stop. Malik's heart pounded, but he kept his voice steady. "Officers, I'm Sergeant Malik Thompson, U.S. Army. My ID's in my pocket. Check it." Carver smirked, leaning closer. "Don't care if you're the damn president. You're not going anywhere till I say so." His breath reeked of coffee and contempt. Malik's mind raced. He could feel the weight of every eye on him, the crowd's anger simmering, ready to boil over. He didn't want this to end in blood, not his, not anyone's. But Carver's hand tightened on his arm, and Malik knew this man wasn't here to de-escalate. Across the street, unnoticed by the cops, a woman in a sharp blazer slipped her phone from her purse. She was Lena Carter, a local journalist who'd been trailing Malik's story for weeks, not for his military honors, but for the quiet way he'd been mentoring kids in the neighborhood, steering them away from trouble. She'd been at the barber shop, working on a feature, when this nightmare unfolded. Now, her fingers flew across her phone, dialing a number she'd saved after an interview with Malik's commanding officer. "Colonel Harris," she whispered urgently when the call connected. "You need to get down here. Now." Back at the patrol car, Carver was doubling down. "You think that uniform makes you special?" he taunted, loud enough for the crowd to hear. "We got a call about a guy like you, casing the bank." Malik's laugh was sharp, bitter. "Casing the bank? I was getting a haircut, man." He nodded toward the barber shop, where old Mr. Jenkins stood in the doorway, shaking his head in disbelief. The crowd's shouts grew louder, a mix of support and rage. Someone threw a water bottle, missing Carver by inches. Ryan flinched, his hand now on his holster. "Everyone, back off," Ryan shouted, his voice cracking. He was new to the force, barely 6 months in, and this wasn't what he'd signed up for. He'd grown up idolizing cops, believing they protected people. But Carver's aggression, the way he zeroed in on Malik without evidence, felt wrong. Ryan's eyes darted to Malik's medals, then to the crowd. He saw his own reflection in their anger. A cop, complicit in a moment he didn't fully understand. Malik sensed the younger cop's hesitation. "Officer Holt," he said, reading the name on Ryan's badge. "You know this ain't right. Check my ID. Call it in." His voice was calm, but his eyes burned with urgency. Ryan hesitated, then reached for Malik's pocket, pulling out the wallet. Carver grabbed his wrist. "What the hell are you doing?" he snapped. "He's playing you, rookie." Before Ryan could respond, a black SUV screeched to a stop beside them. Colonel James Harris stepped out, his uniform as decorated as Malik's, his presence commanding enough to silence the crowd for a split second. Harris was a legend in the 82nd Airborne, a man who'd mentored Malik through the ranks and didn't tolerate nonsense. "Officers," he said, his voice like steel, "you're detaining one of my men. Explain." Carver puffed out his chest, undeterred. "This man's a suspect in a potential robbery. We're handling it." Harris's eyes narrowed, taking in Malik's cuffs, the crowd, the tension. "A suspect?" he repeated, stepping closer. "Sergeant Thompson's a decorated soldier. Served this country with more honor than you'll ever know. Uncuff him. Now." Carver laughed, a short, ugly sound. "With all due respect, Colonel, you don't call the shots here." Harris didn't blink. He pulled out his phone, already dialing. "We'll see about that." The crowd watched, breathless, as Harris spoke in clipped tones to someone on the other end. "Chief Daniels, you've got two officers on Main Street about to make the biggest mistake of their careers. I suggest you handle it." Within minutes, another car rolled up. Chief of Police Marcus Daniels, a man known for his no-nonsense approach but also for his ties to Carver's old-school network. Daniels stepped out, his face unreadable. He glanced at Malik, then at Harris, then at the crowd, their phones still rolling. "What's going on here?" he demanded. Carver launched into his story, painting Malik as a threat, but Daniels cut him off. "You didn't check his ID?" he asked, voice low but dangerous. Ryan, sweating now, handed over Malik's wallet. Daniels opened it, scanned the military ID, and his expression darkened. He turned to Carver. "You cuffed a soldier based on a vague description? No evidence." Carver stammered, but Daniels wasn't listening. He nodded to Ryan. "Uncuff him." Ryan fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking as he freed Malik. The crowd erupted in cheers, but Malik didn't smile. He rubbed his wrists, staring at Carver, who looked like he'd been slapped. Harris stepped forward, placing a hand on Malik's shoulder. "You good, Sergeant?" Malik nodded, but his eyes stayed on Carver. "I'm good, sir. But this," he gestured to the cuffs. "The crowd, the chaos, this ain't." Daniels turned to Carver, his voice cold. "You and I are gonna have a long talk back at the station. You two, halt." Ryan's face fell, his career flashing before his eyes. The crowd began to disperse, some still filming, others whispering about justice. Lena, still clutching her phone, approached Malik. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I saw it all. I called Harris." Malik managed a small smile. "You might have just saved my life." But the weight of the moment lingered. He'd survived war zones, only to be brought to his knees in his own town. The irony was cruel, but it wasn't new. Growing up black in this country, he'd learned early that respect wasn't guaranteed, not by a uniform, not by medals, not by anything. As the cops retreated to their car, Carver muttering under his breath, Malik felt the eyes of the crowd still on him. He wanted to disappear, to shake off the shame and anger, but he knew this moment wasn't just about him. It was about Jamal, about every kid in the neighborhood who'd grow up knowing the system didn't always have their back. He turned to Harris. "Sir, this can't keep happening." Harris nodded, his face grim. "It won't. Not on my watch." But both men knew the fight was far from over. Daniels climbed into his car, already on the phone, his words inaudible but his tone sharp. Within the hour, Whispers would spread through the precinct. Carver and Holt were suspended, pending an investigation. For Carver, a 20-year veteran with a history of complaints, it was the end of the line. For Ryan, it was a wake-up call, one he'd either learn from or drown in. Malik walked back to the barbershop, the crowd parting for him. Mr. Jenkins clapped him on the back. "You showed 'em, son." But Malik didn't feel victorious. He felt tired. Tired of proving his worth. Tired of fighting battles that shouldn't exist. As he stepped inside, Lena followed, her notebook out. "Malik," she said, "this story, it's bigger than today. Let me tell it." He hesitated, then nodded. "Tell it right," he said. "Tell it for the kids who don't have a colonel to call." Lena smiled, her pen already moving. The sun streamed through the barbershop window, illuminating Malik's uniform, his medals, his resolve. This wasn't the end, it was the beginning of a reckoning. Malik sat in the barbershop's worn leather chair, the buzz of clippers now silent, replaced by the weight of what had just happened. The air smelled of aftershave and tension. Mr. Jenkins, the barber, leaned against the counter, shaking his head. "In my 60 years, I seen a lot, but this cuts deep." Malik nodded, his eyes fixed on the floor. His wrists still ached from the cuffs, but the real pain was in his chest, a mix of rage and exhaustion that no metal could shield him from. Lena Carter, the journalist, scribbled furiously in her notebook, her brow furrowed. She'd seen incidents like this before, but witnessing Malik, a man who'd risked his life for his country humiliated on a public street, hit differently. "Malik," she said, looking up, "this could be the story that changes things. People need to hear it." Malik met her gaze, his expression guarded. "People been hearing it for years, Lena. Question is, are they listening?" Outside, the crowd had thinned, but a few lingered, still filming, still talking. The teenage boy from earlier, Trey, hovered near the door, his fists clenched. Malik recognized him from the community center where he volunteered, teaching kids like Trey how to stay out of trouble. "Sarge," Trey said, his voice shaking, "why they do you like that? You a hero." Malik forced a smile, though it felt hollow. "Ain't about being a hero, kid. It's about being seen." Trey's words echoed in Malik's mind as he stepped outside, the sun still high, casting long shadows. He thought of his mother, waiting at home with a birthday cake she'd probably baked from scratch. He'd planned to surprise her, maybe take her to dinner. Instead, he was walking away from a scene that could have ended his life. The thought made his stomach churn. He'd faced insurgents in Afghanistan, but here, in his own country, the enemy wore badges and carried assumptions. Lena followed him, her phone buzzing with notifications. Her call to Colonel Harris had set things in motion, but she knew the story wasn't over. "Malik, I'm pitching this to my editor," she said. "Front page, maybe even national. But I need your voice in it." Malik hesitated. He wasn't one for the spotlight. His service had always been about duty, not fame. But Trey's face, full of anger and confusion, flashed in his mind. This wasn't just about him anymore. "All right," he said finally, "but you gotta tell the whole truth. Not just what happened today, but why it keeps happening." Lena nodded, her eyes fierce with determination. "I will. I promise." Across town, at the police station, Chief Daniels sat in his office, his phone still hot from calls. The mayor had already left a voicemail, demanding answers. The footage from the crowd was spreading online, racking up thousands of views. Daniels knew this wasn't just a PR nightmare, it was a reckoning. Officer Dan Carver sat across from him, defiant, his arms crossed. "I was doing my job," Carver said. "Guy matched the description. You gonna let a mob dictate how we work?" Daniels leaned forward, his voice low. Your job isn't to cuff innocent men because they match a description. You didn't even check his ID, Dan. You saw a black man and decided he was guilty. Carver's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Beside him, Officer Ryan Holt stared at his hands, guilt etched into his face. He hadn't wanted this, but he hadn't stopped it either. Daniels sighed. Carver, you're done. Suspended without pay, pending investigation. Holt, you're on desk duty until I figure out if you're worth keeping. Carver stood, his chair scraping the floor. 20 years on this force, and you're throwing me under the bus for some soldier? Daniels didn't flinch. You threw yourself under, Dan. Get out. As Carver stormed out, Ryan lingered, his voice barely above a whisper. Chief, I didn't know what to do. Daniels looked at him, not unkindly. You know now. Learn from it, or you're next. Back on Main Street, Malik walked toward the community center, needing to clear his head. The center was a squat brick building, covered in murals painted by local kids. Inside, a group of teens was shooting hoops in the gym, their laughter echoing. Malik slipped in quietly, leaning against the wall. One of the kids, a lanky girl named Aisha, spotted him.
Yo, Sarge.
You good. Word had already spread. Malik forced a nod. I'm good, Aisha. You'll keep working on that jump shot. But Aisha wasn't buying it. She jogged over, her sneakers squeaking. I saw the video online. Them cops were Wilden. You gonna sue? Malik chuckled, though it lacked humor. Ain't about suing, kid. It's about making sure you don't go through the same. Aisha frowned, her braids swinging as she shook her head. How you so calm? I'd be pissed. Malik looked at her, seeing the same fire he'd felt at her age. I'm pissed, he admitted. But I learned a long time ago you don't fight hate with more hate. You fight it with purpose. Aisha didn't look convinced, but she nodded, heading back to the court. Malik watched her go, wondering how many more kids would have to grow up dodging the same traps. That evening, Malik finally made it to his mother's house. The small ranch-style home was warm with the smell of vanilla and cinnamon. His mom, Deborah, greeted him with a hug that lingered longer than usual. I heard, she whispered, her voice thick. Thank God you're okay. Malik held her tight, feeling like a kid again.
I'm all right, Ma.
Just another day. But it wasn't just another day. Over dinner, Deborah listened as Malik recounted the incident, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. You served this country, she said, her voice breaking, and they still treat you like a criminal. Malik reached for her hand. Not everyone, Ma. There were people out there tote strangers stood up for me. That's something. Deborah shook her head. It shouldn't take a crowd to get justice. Malik didn't argue. She was right. But he thought of Lena's article, of Colonel Harris's swift action, of Ryan Holt's hesitation. There were cracks in the system, and maybe, just maybe, they could be widened into change. The next morning, Lena's article hit the front page of the local paper, with a headline that pulled no punches, Hero in Handcuffs. A soldier's ordeal sparks outrage. The story detailed Malik's service, the incident, and the swift fallout for Carver and Holt. By noon, it was picked up by national outlets, the video footage going viral. Social media exploded with hashtags Justice for Malik, End Racial Profiling. Protests formed outside the police station, demanding reform. Malik watched it unfold from the community center, where he was helping Trey with his math homework. You famous now, Sarge? Trey teased, but his eyes were serious. You think this changes anything? Malik leaned back, considering. It's a start, but change ain't just protests or headlines. It's what we do every day, how we treat each other, how we hold people accountable. Trey nodded, but Malik could see the doubt. He felt it too. Over the next week, the story grew legs. Colonel Harris pushed for a formal investigation into the police department's practices, backed by the mayor, who was feeling the heat from the public. Community leaders organized forums, inviting Malik to speak. He was reluctant but agreed, knowing his voice could amplify others. At the first forum, he stood before a packed room, his uniform replaced by a simple sweater, but his presence just as commanding. "I'm not here to talk about me," he began, his voice steady. "I'm here for my cousin Jamal, who didn't make it home. For kids like Trey and Aisha, who deserve better. This ain't just about one bad cop, it's about a system that lets bad cops thrive." The room erupted in applause, but Malik raised a hand. "Don't clap yet. We got work to do. Start by listening to each other, not just shouting." His words resonated, sparking debates across the city. Some praised his restraint. Others criticized it, saying he should have fought harder, sued, or called out the whole department. Malik listened to it all, knowing there was no perfect answer. He met with Ryan Holt, who'd reached out, ashamed and seeking redemption. "I froze," Ryan admitted over coffee. "I should have stopped him." Malik studied him, seeing a man wrestling with his own failures. "You didn't stop him," Malik said, "but you can start fixing it. Be better." Ryan nodded, vowing to push for bias training at the precinct. It wasn't enough, but it was a step. Carver, meanwhile, faded into obscurity, his career over, his name a cautionary tale. Chief Daniels implemented new protocols, mandatory body cams, stricter oversight, but Malik knew policies alone wouldn't heal the divide. Months later, Malik stood at the community center, watching Trey and Aisha graduate from a mentorship program he'd expanded with Lena's help. The room was packed with families, proud and hopeful. Lena's article had won awards, but more importantly, it had sparked a citywide initiative to bridge the gap between police and communities. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. As Malik looked out at the crowd, he felt the weight of his journey, not just the cuffs, but the purpose they'd forged. He'd survived war, prejudice, and doubt, and he was still standing. The fight wasn't over, but he wasn't alone. He thought of the wooden sign from that day, its words etched in his mind. Justice or power? A soldier's fight. The question lingered, demanding an answer. What do you think? Where does justice begin? And how do we confront the divides in our communities?